At this time, I would take public testimony in favor of the ADUs, known as accessory dwelling units. Please state your name, your address, and who you are.
Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily Moscow. You have my written comments, and as long as the criteria remain, I'm in favor of this. In looking at the packet this afternoon, I noticed that other people have mentioned registering these on a yearly basis or every couple of years. I just thought I would address that briefly. I think it's a really good idea to have some kind of registry, and I would suggest keeping it super simple so that you don't make a lot of work for staff. And I don't know how they're normally done, but the way I would do it, I use little check boxes, and I came up with something this afternoon that might cover the bases as I see it. The questions I would have is something like, I currently reside in the principal unit or the accessory unit or off-site. They can't be off-site. If they self-report themselves as being off-site, you've got a red flag, and then you know to go after it. Addressing for the principal and accessory units are same or different. New ones will be different, but the old ones might not be, and emergency services like residences to have separate addresses. So if there's a fire, they know which one they're going to. So you could catch that. Then I would have something like principal unit is being used for my residence, checkbox, or family or friend residence, or guest accommodation, maybe granny's gone and now you're just using it for guests, or rental or other. It gives you a little information. And then the same questions to the accessory unit, how it's being used. And then if either unit is not being used as a resident, how is it being used? Which is just informational to you, how it's going along economically. So maybe if it's no longer being used as a resident, it might be workspace for gardening, hobby office, something like that. Maybe a glorified man cave in the basement now. You know, it might just be interesting to know that. And has it been vacant for a year or more than a year? Because that might tell you something in terms of finances or economics. So anyway, I do think it's really important to have some kind of registry, and I recognize that it needs to be very simple. And I think it can be very, very simple, and it would just help with the whole process and assure the neighbors that if it's going off track, you've got a way of catching it. So I was just going to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Additional testimony in favor? I would take a general testimony or opposition at this time. Please come up, state your name and address.
I'm Roberta Radovich. I live at 809 East B Street, Port Russell neighborhood. I'm a landlord, and the passing of this might be really useful to me, but I'm not altogether in favor of it. Part of the reason is because I have experienced as a landlord, when my tenants have gotten out of hand, how difficult that is on the neighbors in those areas. You know, someone can come into you and they're both med students and they have good references, but then they throw a party that goes all night, and I hear about it from the neighbors on both sides. And I had, you know, the guy that moved in, and there was the barking dogs next door in the single-family zone. But, you know, he got so aggressive with the owners of that property that I got a call from them, and they said, you know, my wife is afraid this guy's going to come over and kill her dog. You know, so this sort of thing can happen when you intersperse rapid turnover rentals into an area that's a single-family zone. And it can happen in a duplex zone too, but when people got that single-family house, they had an understanding that there would be a certain amount of peace and protection. They imagined a neighbor that could really be somebody that they would become friends with, not somebody that would turn over every half a year or 1 year, that would not have a long-term relationship. So I'm having some difficulties with, not so much with the units. Now, my house is a duplex. It's been a duplex since 1950, so it's grandfathered in, and it's in a single-family zone. Parking becomes a problem in my street in Fort Russell. I see that they ask for one more parking space, and I'm grateful for that on that ordinance. But when you introduce a backyard structure, it does change the character of a neighborhood. I've seen a couple of these added up in our neighborhood, and they are just behemoth. They gobble up the yard, and they just destroy the privacy of your backyard next door. There's no way not to have them looking down into your yard until maybe 10 years have gone by and you can plant some kind of plantings that grow up in front of those dormer windows or the windows on the end of the house that may be looking down into what was once your private backyard. So I would say if someone is living as a landlord, living in a single-family house and adds an accessory unit in his basement or his upstairs, he's living with that person very directly and is far more likely to be concerned about the details that would concern others in a single-family neighborhood. If he can isolate them to a place out in the back, there's liable to be other things happening. And anytime you add renters, you're also adding additional pets in a neighborhood, which truthfully can be really, really annoying if you're a single-family person next to that. So I feel like there's no protection left once you pass this kind of an ordinance. There's no protection left for people that really want neighbors that they can count on being homeowners and not of a transient nature. I would especially ask you to consider putting a variance in the R1 single-family zone so that we can preserve a place of peace somewhere in the city for people who really need that. I mean, there's different ideas. We have an increasing...
Roberta, could you please wrap it up so we could go on?
I'm sorry?
Would
Yes.
you please wrap it up?
Yeah,
We
I have
understand that you're opposed to it, so...
One statement. The concept that our populations are increasing and we should all make accommodations is one idea, but I would say that the other concept is we're getting squeezed all the time, and people that really want peace should be allowed a place to have that. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. A question
Walter?
for Roberta, if I may. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
you made a comment about putting a variance in the R1 zone. Can you explain that?
Well, I just mean that right now they're not permitted without having input from the neighborhoods. I mean, you can't add a rental unit in a single-family zone without getting some kind of a variance for that.
Mike may have to help me here. Do you mean a conditional use permit?
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. I'm sorry, my terminology is
Might be a good
bad.
question to ask Mike Walter rather than Roberta.
Well, she was the one that posed the
Yeah, but she might not know
situation.
the solution to it, but Mike may have the answer whether it's feasible or not. So let's hear from
Answer me
Mike.
when you get back to the podium, please, Mike. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Michael, I'm going to go ahead and let you answer that question right now, if you can bring it up, so we can clear it up before I ask for additional time.
Did you understand what point she was making, and is that a conditional use permit?
We currently don't draw a distinction between rental and owner-occupied property within any zone. So you can have a single-family dwelling, and whether you choose to rent it out or live in it, there's no distinction under our zoning code. In order to have additional occupants, like 6 unrelated individuals, sometimes you go through either a boarding house or a residential rental unit, and that may be what she's referring to in an R1 zone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I will take additional testimony for general or opposed. Please state your name and address, sir.
My name is Mike McGann. I live at 942 North Cleveland in Moscow. Mr. Mayor and Council, nice to see you all again. I have three concerns, and my number one is it's going to change the character of a single-family residence. It has to. I mean, that's why we bought in single-family neighborhoods. It will change the character regardless of what we do. And I think that another additional thing is that the parking, off-street parking and on-street parking. You get in a neighborhood right now that has 30-foot wide streets with parking only on one side, and you add another vehicle, and most people, if you're a family of four and you're living upstairs, well, probably you'll have at least 3 cars. And then if you have the 600 square foot, and you have, excuse me, 2 folks downstairs, and they're likely to have at least 1 car, maybe 2. So where are all these cars going to park, especially when you're in a neighborhood where there's only a 30-foot wide street? And my last item is, I'd like you to consider a conditional use permit. So it involves the neighborhood and let the neighborhood have some kind of say on what's going on in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Additional testimony for either general or opposed.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Ken White. I live at 835 Harold Street in Moscow. The previous speakers covered an awful lot of the same points that I have, same concerns. I think over time, and it's not going to happen in the first year or two if this passes, but in the long term, I can see the single-family residential neighborhood as being a thing of the past, with rental units and the majority of the people that were filled out the survey that would consider, if I remember this right, Mike, a majority of the people that filled the survey out that said they would consider putting up a ADU or would plan on renting it, and that would just be a start. Other ADUs that might have the mother-in-law in it or the granny, whatever. Once the granny moves on elsewhere, it'll more than likely become a rental. So essentially, in my opinion, we're looking at, this ordinance looks at rental units, not a granny flat type accommodation. And I think the big, I guess the biggest reason I have for opposing it is the character of the neighborhoods. To me, both R1 and R2, I live in an R2, and it's a single-family residential neighborhood, and my wife and I cherish living in that kind of a setting. We've got a nice, quiet street, good neighbors for the most part. But I see that street as going away from that over time and becoming, I guess, a multifamily residential district. And I prefer everybody has their preference, and I prefer the lower density single-family neighborhood, and I think a lot of people in Moscow do that as well. Some of the people just spoke about that, but anyway, I won't. The R1 and R2 being to me, they had a draft proposal, or a draft ordinance early on that I've been following the P&Z with, and it came back as exempting zone R1 and zone R2 from this accessory dwelling units. And to me, that's reasonable. Then it then applies in areas that are already multifamily type homes and apartments and that sort of thing. So anyway, I think if our purpose is to accommodate in-laws and grannies, we're kind of off base. It's not really doing that without it. To me, it's more of a changing of the neighborhood. And anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, additional testimony, general testimony, or opposition?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I would note that there were several letters and communications that were included in the packet for the record.
Oh, the council, and how many were there? There were 4. All council members read these. They were part of the packet over the weekend. I think there was 4, if I remember right.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on those from the council standpoint? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing at 7:59. Turn it over to council. How would you like to proceed?